Hello, everybody, and welcome to the reading room again. It's another episode of Proofread where I'm talking to people I just want to talk to. And one of the people that I met recently was Mr. Mark Stoney. Mark, welcome to the channel. How are you today?
I'm doing all right. It's been an interesting day to say the least, but doing all right. I
Hmm.
was on a 6-hour stream earlier with some people we're acquainted with mutually. Lupin, see
Yeah.
now I know. They're doing a
You said
stream
they're
right
giving
now
you a
over
hard
there.
time. A hard
Yeah,
time. Yeah.
he's having a hard time, and I understand that. I've had my share of hard
Yeah.
times as well.
Sure. Sure. How do you cope with stuff like that? How do you deal with somebody that is sort of on your case, if you will, sort of really attacking you, kind of thing?
I really like to hear them out. I
Mhm.
don't. That's not to say that I'm gonna let them get away with verbally assaulting me without any resistance whatsoever. But I
Right.
think it's important to hear somebody's complaints so that you understand where they're coming from, so that you can have a better idea of how to resolve the issue.
Hmm. Yeah, you can't really resolve something unless you don't know what the other side is. I do
Right.
agree. Um, yeah, I've been through a lot of sort of hard times, these hard conversations. My background was complaints, basically, was part of my background. But why don't you give people an idea of your background? Like, where do you come from? I understand that you were in the military.
Yeah.
You
Okay.
did do service for your country.
Sure. Yeah. Well, I guess my story kind of starts, well, obviously a long time before this, but 9/11 was a very impactful day
Hmm.
in my young life. I was in the ninth grade, a freshman in high school, and we watched it unfold live on TV, and that really had a big impact on me. And I felt that as a young man living in a country with people that I love, my family, my friends, my neighbors, there's a call to do the right thing and defend that, that sense of community, that freedom that we have in the American way of life. Now, to make a long story short and not really go on a political rant, I um, do not really like where I was at that point in time with the reasons that I had for going into the military service. I feel like I was
Right,
very misled by propaganda. Weapons of mass destruction was a big lie,
right,
and it
right.
turned
Yeah.
out to be. But, I wanted to get revenge on these 9/11
Mhm.
perpetrators, and so I joined the army, and I did serve in Iraq for 1 year in 2007 through 2008. I did see combat. I'm a combat infantryman. I've got my badge, all that good stuff.
Mhm.
Did my time in the service and got out with an honorable discharge, and it was not very long after I got out that I started really, grappling with PTSD.
Of course,
I'm
yeah.
Yeah, and, it happens. People go through traumatic experiences, and it's just the nature of the way that the human brain works that, that fight or flight, once you've exceeded the limitations of your ability to, rationalize everything
Yes,
around
yes,
you, you're in overdrive. So it
yeah.
rewires you with the expectation. It's like setting the bar again. It's like setting the bar a little higher for that
Mm.
level, that threshold of what you can deal with. Um, and and I recognized these things that were happening to me because I'm inquisitive. I'm a very inquisitive person. I always want to know
I've noticed, yeah.
why why things are the way that they are, why things work the way they do, why
Mhm.
people act the way they do, and I recognize in myself some issues. I was certainly very short fused. I felt like I was always under the gun, so to speak. The hypervigilance was one of my biggest issues, and I was having flashbacks. So all that, I didn't really know what was going on, so I sought out help, and I have, and this is where Kent Hovind gets his whole Mark Stoney's loony. Mark Stoney was kicked out of the military for being a psychopath. I checked myself into the VA mental health ward in Augusta, Georgia, because I was going
Mhm.
through a rough time. And,
Yeah.
I had my daughter. She was very, very young at the time, and my late ex-wife was still alive and had her, and everything was fine as far as that goes. But I spent about a week in the hospital and learned a lot of stuff and really got centered as far as understanding what I was grappling with, and also having on board some medications that were able to help some of the more extenuating uh, symptoms that come along with PTSD. And I was doing really well.
And
But
that's absolutely nothing to be ashamed of. That
no,
is
not
that
at
is
all.
a
Not at all.
responsible thing to do, having come out of the situation. You know, a lot of veterans don't get access to that, and they can go down a very deep hole, and so that's a responsible thing to do. I don't. That does not make anybody mentally ill. It just means that they're struggling with certain problems in their life.
Well,
That's
it is a mental illness, but not in the
mm,
sense like it's not an antisocial
right.
personality disorder. It's not like a genetic thing. Anybody can get PTSD, literally
Oh,
anybody,
sure,
but
yeah.
it's more of a circumstantial than anything like mental illness in the
Mm.
sense. So
It's not
anyway,
a chronic mental illness,
yeah,
is
it
what you're
is, and
saying.
and
That
actually, I have
yeah.
been diagnosed with chronic PTSD,
Okay,
but
yeah.
I cope with it because I recognize what
Mm,
it is. I recognize the signs and symptoms, and I can, take an introspective look at myself and realize if I'm on the right track, if I'm struggling. Like I've been with it long enough, or it's been with me long enough that it's manageable, and I cope well. And
mhm.
and this is my daughter here behind me, so I've had some accusations, especially today, that I have anger issues. Mackenzie, do I have anger issues? Not that she knows of. I mean, this is my daughter. We live in the same house. It's a small house, and that's not to say that I don't get upset and I don't get angry. She can
Yeah.
certainly attest that I can. But as far as like anger issues that are precluding me from being on the same level intellectually or as a human or any other metric you may want to pick out, like, no, it's not like that at all with me. I do have the mental illness, and I'll say that because it's what it is, and we need to call things what they are, of PTSD. But it doesn't define me, it doesn't rule me, and I certainly don't suffer from it anymore. But it's something that's going to be with me the rest of my life, and I have to be aware of that. But that's what Kent Hovind latched onto, because I was
Yeah.
there and I was close with him and told him I'm an open book. Like I'm not ashamed of my life. I know there's some things that I've done that are shameful, but
I think that
there's no reason. Yeah, I mean, what are you
everybody
gonna
has.
do? Make up
Yeah.
stories to cover for what you're ashamed of? You're gonna lose track. You're gonna end up lying about stuff. It's pointless. Like, I've been where I've been and I've done what I've done, and I have to own that. But I had that kind of personal relationship with Kent where I was really comfortable with opening up to him about what I was going through and why I was there even. And that was something that came up. And it's really just shameful that he turned that around and decided to use that against me and say that I was kicked out for being psychotic, that I shouldn't be
Of the
trusted with my
military, you mean?
daughter. Yeah,
Yeah.
kicked out of the military.
Yeah.
No, I did my time, I did my contract, and I was honorably discharged. So that is just a bold-faced lie on its face. And I've corrected
Well,
Kent. I've showed him my DD
I
214,
know, and
and
that's what amazes me when you show the discharge papers and it's clearly not a Section 8, it's an honorable discharge, and he still says the same thing, and it baffles me
right.
why somebody would lie in the face of such overwhelming evidence to the contrary. Like, you've got you didn't have to show your discharge papers, you shouldn't have to, but you decided to.
Mhm.
Um, and how does it bewilders me how one still tries to maintain a story through that kind of evidence. It really does, because
Right.
that is
Yeah,
a lie and has been demonstrated to be so. I don't understand.
I really wish I could explain it, but Kent's an anomaly. I know he's been called a narcissist, and I would agree with that. Charlatan, I would agree with that. False teacher, I would agree with that. And a plethora of other, accusations, but he really does embody all of them. So it's hard to pinpoint exactly what's going on with the guy. It's almost like a case study, and I don't even know all of the weirdness that goes on inside people's minds, and what they're capable of doing and saying. But it's a
Why did
cult
you go?
mentality, it really is. Kent Hovind is a cult leader, he's a cult of personality, and in reality, his whole entire, establishment down there at Dinosaur Adventureland, he says he has a board and this distinction between his, ministry and the for-profit and the not for-profit, but really what it all boils down to is Kent is the top dog, the head honcho. What he says goes regardless. Yeah, he's got a board of yes men that he will manipulate and appoint people who he knows will do exactly what his bidding is. But he's a con man, he's a charlatan, he's all of that and more. So it's sad that Kent acts this way because he's a charismatic guy. Like
Well, con
if
men
he could,
usually are.
yeah, if he could
Yeah.
refocus that charisma into something productive for society, I think that he could be, a force for good, but he doesn't. He's all about himself. He's all about his image, his Hawaiian shirts and his Dinosaur Adventureland and whichever flashy wife he decides to put on screen, this month. It's the flavor of the week. So there's so much hypocrisy and so much just blind following of Kent. It's hard not to identify it as a cult because that's kind of you think about brainwashing, and it's basically when everything that should be normal, in a normal situation is really in reality completely backwards, and it's just a dogmatic position that forms in people's minds. And it's sad that people can become this malleable in the hands of someone like Hovind because people are valuable. They have everybody has value. Everybody has intrinsic worth as a human being. And what makes me despise Kent Hovind and the way he treats people is he treats them like garbage. I mean, I've heard him, and this is a video on my channel. He's talking to some guests, and this is what's crazy. He'll say this right in front of his guests. Uh, he had just kicked somebody out, and these guests are seemingly getting ready to leave, and they had their fun time at Dinosaur Adventureland, and he says, when you're getting rid of people, sometimes it just feels like, you've had been constipated for a really long time and now you've taken a big old dump. And like that's how he views people. Like he looks at people in at having the same moral value as his bowel movements, and it's just deplorable.
Yeah, and that's ending of a friendship as well, which is
Yeah.
even scarier. I don't think I've had a friendship ended where I'm just sort of saying, "Hey, I've just had a bowel movement." I think it's always regrettable, and it's always something that I've had to do to set boundaries for myself. But I don't think I've ever sort of taken this idea of, oh well, it's great to have this thing on kind of thing. I think it's always sort of harmful. I really would like to know though, how did you end up there in the first place? Like, what was the series of events that led you to being a permanent fixture at DAL?
Sure. So I didn't know who Kent Hovind was. I'd never heard of him growing up. It wasn't until 2017 that I had even seen Kent Hovind on YouTube, and somebody in a Facebook group had suggested I watch his creation stuff because it was a creation evolution debate page.
Yeah.
So I checked out Kent Hovind, and I kind of at the time I had the same like doomsday, imminent rapture, what have you. The world's going to hell in a handbasket ideology mentality. And Kent had the same thing, and he had this 140 acres in my backyard. I lived in Birmingham, Alabama at the time, and he's
Okay.
in Lenox, Alabama, which is like a 3-hour drive, not even. And I went down to visit Kent uh, in June of 2018. And at that time, the first time I went, I stayed for like 3 days. And I really liked the atmosphere. I really enjoyed the camaraderie that the community had, and just the sense of belonging, because I am a creationist. I do believe in God. I am a Christian. So
Mhm.
at its face, this was right up my alley. You've got the same eschatological view, which is like the end time stuff, the same doomsday mentality, the prepper mentality, we got to get away from big cities mentality, and especially the time, like the 2018. This is right in the middle of Trump's presidency, so there was
Right.
a lot going on, not just in my life but around the world politically. It just seemed like a good place to be in that kind of tumultuous world. And I really bought into it. I bought into this community. I bought into Hovind, and I was a cult member. I was brainwashed, and I have to admit that to myself, because there's no other rationalization for why I was there and why I stayed so long. There are so many things that should have been red flags for me that, looking back, they're obvious, but in the moment, you just have blinders on, and you
Mm.
tend to excuse things that you normally wouldn't, because you have this concept of, you know, uh, none of this is going to matter tomorrow anyway, because the end's coming and I'm here. I might as well stick it out.
Mhm.
Uh, so I was really bought into it. I was really sold into it, and Hovind really liked my mentality. He liked the fact that I'm a combat veteran. He liked the fact that I had guns. He liked the fact that I was dependent on Brady Byram to help me get my daughter back in a situation. Which, by the way, I don't want to go into too much detail about that. But when I decided to move to Dinosaur Adventureland, uh, I was going to volunteer for a month, and my parents had done a little bit of skimming on the internet and research on Kent Hovind, and they were very, very shocked at what they found. They were very uncomfortable with my daughter, their granddaughter, being taken down to this place, and their justifications were, well, it's a dangerous construction site. It's not a good place for kids. There was the pedophile thing that I was completely unaware of at the
Mm.
time, and also that Kent Hovind's anti-tax stance, which that was
Yeah.
something else that drew me to him, because I was very much in the libertarian movement, the Tea Party movement, the taxed enough already,
Mhm.
and even to a degree, the sovereign citizen stuff was in a sense appealing to me. I'm not a sovereign citizen, and I'm not in the Tea Party. I would still consider myself a libertarian politically, but more of a moderate than that
Right.
even.
Yeah. Yeah.
So,
Um, so how did that differ from how you came out? Like, did things change over time for you in the
oh
way
yeah.
that you were treated?
Oh yeah. So, you know, in the beginning there, I was in a very vulnerable place, because I was going through the court system, the family court, trying to get my daughter back, and
And who's
um,
who's Brady Byron? Sorry to interrupt, but who's Brady Byron? Just
oh,
so we know who this is.
okay, Brady Byram. Wow.
You said you
Hey,
were
before we,
depending on him through to help you
no,
through the
she
courts.
she knows. I'm not going to tell her to leave the room. But Brady Byram is an incestuous pedophile.
Okay,
His
I
own
don't know who that
children
is.
have publicly accused him of this stuff, and I'm sorry if that's like a no-no word for your channel, but it's the fact. His son
Eh,
reached out to me, and with this long letter about the things that went on in their family and why they have nothing to do with him, and he has nothing to do with them. And I don't want to go like into all that detail, because it's just disgusting,
yeah,
but
yeah. Well,
those two
just
words
why were you
encapsulate.
relying on him, like, to get you through the
So
court system?
Brady is a sovereign citizen, and this is the whole concept behind Kent Hovind, behind Brady Byram, Paul Hansen, Ernie Land. They're all sovereign citizens, and they have a sovereign man theology, even, which is just it's corrupt. It's a terrible idea. It's the worst thing you could possibly get into. They're actually considered on the domestic terrorist watch list as well, and I'm probably on the list myself for having affiliations with these people. But Brady Byram is the man who made the website Kent Hovind is Innocent,
Okay,
whichever,
gotcha.
and
Yeah,
also
yeah.
did a YouTube video series. And he portrays himself as some kind of legal guru. Uh, he's been in some trouble with the law and managed to weasel his way out of that.
Mhm.
And he's a sweet talker, eloquent talker, but you know he's got some really 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 ugly skeletons hiding in his closet that he doesn't want people to know about, and he won't. But the thing is, I've confronted him about this accusation, and it's more than an accusation. It's the testimony of his own children at this point, and I
So
confronted him
he's an
about it and asked him directly.
alleged criminal, shady past,
Sure.
and why were you relying on him? Like, what was the was
Okay.
he a lawyer of some sort, or
Yes.
was he
So that's what I
okay?
was getting at. Kent surrounds himself self with these pseudo attorneys, these fake lawyers like Paul J.
Okay, gotcha.
Hansen, Glenn Stoll, and Brady was one of them. Brady,
Right.
Kent is eternally indebted to Brady Byram because he did Kent Hovind is Innocent, that whole video series, which Kent's convinced proves his innocence. And it doesn't. It's ridiculous. It's the most ridiculous thing. But anyway, I didn't know anything about Brady's past. All I knew was here's a guy that Kent said Brady will take care of it. You know, Brady will help you get your daughter back because he's done this before. He helped save kids from the system. You know, the government's going to take your child and send them to Bohemian Grove and do unspeakable things if Brady doesn't help you. Like that's the mentality that they have because it's
Right.
conspiracy theory central, essentially. But yeah, Brady did offer me more than solicited legal advice and kind of advised me through the process, which was probably detrimental to my case more than anything, because
Right.
it really, oh my goodness, this is hard to talk about. So Brady Byram had me helped me write a federal criminal complaint against my own parents for them taking my daughter from me and then that whole thing. And it was very very serious, and the laws that he brought up and the penalties that he cited, eh, up to and including the death penalty, and I okayed that. You know, I okayed that. I took it to the courthouse, the federal courthouse, and I was desperate to get my daughter back. I'd been without
Mhm.
her for 15 16 months at this time, just getting delay after delay after delay in the family court system. But I did file that case. It was dismissed without prejudice, which I am so happy because
Yeah.
I could not imagine even living with myself if my parents were in prison because of that. Because all they were doing was looking out for my daughter, looking out for her best interest, and I didn't see that at the time.
Right.
You know,
Right.
here I am, infantryman, combat vet. I can face any challenge that comes up against me, up to and including, dealing with pedophiles if I have to. It never
Yeah.
came to that, but I'm not Superman, and I have to realize that, and I have over the years that I can't prevent any and all happenings, even with my own daughter. I
Right.
mean, I do what I can, but it's a big world out there, and I can't control every aspect of it, and I don't try to.
Absolutely. You can only control what you do. You can't control everything.
Right.
It's just, and you can only do your best. If you're doing your best, what else are you going to do? You're doing your best.
I mean, I
That's
guess
all
you
you
could do
can do.
nothing, but
Well, I
that's
mean,
not an option.
that's not an option. So you
Right.
just do your best, and
Yeah.
that's if it's the best you can do, that is the best you can do, and that's all
Yeah.
you can do. And once I was told sort of, and something that stuck with me when I've thought about, why did my parents do this? Like, a perfect parent is a bad parent. Somebody that gets the kid exactly what they want and everything that everything they could ever want for is a bad parent. A good parent is one that's good enough. And that's the secret.
The good
Or you
parent is
can,
the one that's there, you know?
yeah,
And
absolutely,
and I
yeah,
know there's outliers with, like, child abuse and everything, and that's
yeah,
not what we're
yeah.
talking about, but if you're
No,
there
no,
for
I
your
get you though.
child,
Yeah,
you don't have to be the smartest, the fastest, the strongest, the bestest
right,
at
right.
everything. Little boys are going to go to school and talk about my dad can beat your dad up. They idolize you. And the worst thing you can do to somebody who idolizes you is to cease to exist for them.
Yeah,
So
I
be there
would
for
agree
your
with that.
kids. That's
Mm.
what's important.
Yeah. So you've gotten out of this. You're in this sort of state of mind of us against the world kind of thing, more or less.
Hmm.
Um, can you take me through, and of course, sort of having a people around you that have the same ideas, the same religious beliefs, same everything is really appealing. So can you take me through what's a day in the life of a new member like? Like what happens there day by day? You wake up in the morning and fill in the blank. What is actually expected of new members?
Sure. So, well, there's not really a membership per se.
Okay.
There's yeah, but say somebody comes to visit. In Kent's mind, they're there to volunteer. That's how he views
Okay.
everybody as a volunteer. Even though his Dinosaur Adventureland is registered as a charity or actually it's a homeless shelter is what it's registered as, and that's why it's considered a charity. He looks at everybody as a volunteer. And, if you're running a volunteer organization and you've got people coming to you, what's the first thing you're going to do? You're going to put them to work. And he's very open about that too. He'll even say it, make jokes about it on his YouTube channel, but he's being serious. When you get there, if you're going to stay for a day, yeah, you'll get the tour, you'll get the ride, and there won't really be time to pick up a hammer because, it's like a half a day ordeal to go through Kent's whole shtick. And he does it day in and day out. I don't know how he has the energy for it, but um so if it ends up that you're there for a couple of days or a couple of weeks, you will be put to work, and if you do not get to work, you'll be very adamantly asked to leave until you're gone. Kent doesn't like freeloaders, even though he is one of the biggest grifter freeloader types there is. He can't stand it when other people do it.
Right.
And, that's one of the things he likes to hang over people and kinda guilt trip them. It's like, "You took 30 minutes off, so, you need to get to work," And that's one of the things, that mentality that got him in trouble with the IRS in the first place, because at the old Dinosaur Adventureland in Pensacola, he installed a time clock for his
Mm,
or well, he called them missionaries, but he was paying them wages, he wasn't withholding taxes. um he would just say, hey, you've got to do your own contractor stuff, and he did that with me here at this new Dinosaur Adventureland. He told me to go set up a I-9, a private business bank account, and that they would write me checks and all this. I only ever got one check as like a salary or payment or whatever, because it was $250 and I've got my own income, so it just wasn't, I didn't feel good about taking money because it was coming from the ministry. I've got my
right.
own money, so I told Kent, I don't want to take a payment. I don't want you to pay me anything. In fact, I'm gonna, contribute my time, efforts, and money because I have my own income.
Mm,
Well, you know, Kent doesn't like it when people decide or make any kind of decision. And what it boiled down to, that ultimately, um, I told Kent the decision I would make if he invited a particular individual, Chris Jones, back to Dinosaur Adventureland. And I made my decision very clear and in advanced that if Chris Jones were to ever come back to Dinosaur Adventureland, that I would be gone permanently. So, um, Kent not liking other people to make decisions made my decision for me by inviting Chris Jones back. And
mm,
that was the final straw of, absolutely, I can't be involved with this anymore. And even leading up to that, there was a lot of growth on my part as far as, being more critical of my faith and not just taking Hovind at his word, because I was there for 2 years and I heard all of his, bad arguments, not just for evolution creation, but for any kind of doctrine as well. And it really pushed me to study harder and to get a better understanding of what not just the scripture says, but to be more open to listen to the other side of the creation evolution argument.
Right.
So I really started not fitting in as far as the being in lockstep, do what Hovind says. And another one of the catalysts for Kent not wanting me there anymore was my support of Cindy Lincoln. I
Yes.
was there day to day, seeing what was going on. I was counseling Kent and Cindy,
Mhm.
involved in meetings between them and other people at Dinosaur Adventureland. So I was very aware of everything that was going on, the body slam, and that whole thing. I heard that with my own ears in real time. I didn't see it happen, but I was close enough that I heard that. But Kent doesn't like it when you oppose him. So I would stand in opposition, not so that he wouldn't like me. In fact, quite the opposite. I wanted to help him to become a better person and to handle these situations, you know, in a good and healthy way. But he didn't want that. He wanted yes men. He wanted you to say, "Okay, Kent," and do what he says. He wanted me to go put a mattress up in a tree so that Cindy couldn't sleep in her spare bedroom. I mean, not me literally, but he has said things like that to people. I
Did
know
he
you're looking at
actually
me
do
funny,
that?
Mark, but I've got recordings of this stuff.
No, I don't find that funny. I find it concerning.
It is.
That
It's
sort of
extremely concerning.
so is that sort of in your mind, is that a punishment for defying him? Is putting sort of somebody in discomfort, like having to sleep up a tree, is that a punishment for defiance, or what
Yes.
is that?
So Kent uh, was constantly recording Cindy all day, every day. Any interaction that they had, he had to bring out his phone and start recording audio. And it was getting to Cindy because she just wanted to have a conversation between her and her husband about some of the issues that were going on, revolving around Steve Lynn and the Chris Jones stuff. And ultimately, what happened between Kent and Cindy is she started sleeping in the spare bedroom. That became her bedroom. So she had a bed,
Okay,
a mattress,
having problems, that's
sure.
normal.
They were still
That's
under the
you
same
know,
roof, right?
yeah, yeah, that's
Well,
normal.
yeah, yeah. So I call it spousal rape what Kent was trying to do because he'll even you can hear on these recordings telling Cindy, "You're late, come to bed, come home and come to bed, let's cuddle, let's do all this." So Cindy didn't want to sleep in the bed with Kent, which is understandable at this point.
Yes, yeah.
So she had her spare bedroom. Kent would take he took a garden hose and soaked her mattress with it so that she couldn't sleep in her bed, so that she would have to sleep in his bed. And that was so that he could have his way with her because I've spoken to Cindy many times and that's the gist. I don't want to go into any kind of graphic detail or
No,
any
I know,
further
I understand.
explanation
I
than
don't
that. But
yeah, I don't want to.
that was why he wanted to get her in bed so he could get her in bed.
So he's using sort of this discomfort and um, sort of forcing her to do something that she doesn't want to do.
Yeah. And that's
Yeah,
why I say it's kind of a form of spousal rape because it's getting your way without consent. And
yeah.
that's exactly what he's doing. He was forcing her in a situation where her consent was meaningless.
Well, he's certainly depriving her of her liberty.
Right.
I would certainly say that. And so, um, was there a lot of this stuff going on? Like, with everybody there, was there sort of this manipulation of people when they didn't work or didn't do this? Was there kind of those punishments eked out? Like, if I decided that, hey, I was sick and I couldn't work, was there this kind of punishment, either psychologically or physically? Was that sort of dealt out if you did sort of buck the norm of what
Oh,
you're
yeah.
expected to do there?
For sure. So Kent would go around on off days, which he said that volunteers could take Sunday and Monday off and not work. So, but every Sunday and Monday, he would go around knocking on doors, trying to gather people up to do projects because he wants to
Right.
work, 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 work all day, every day. And he would guilt trip people into working. And it would get to the point where if you didn't just accept the project, you know, you felt bad because you're not meeting expectations. We've got more work to do for the kingdom. We've got to get this going because, the world's coming to an end, right? If that makes
Right.
sense.
Not really. I
No,
mean,
it
if the
doesn't.
world's
It
coming
doesn't. It's
to an end,
concept.
the park isn't going to be there. So I don't know why
Right,
that's
right.
important.
So it's a living contradiction, Kent, with
Yeah,
his
sounds like it. Yeah.
yeah, his very uh imminent views on the tribulation and rapture. Kent's got this whole actually I have it somewhere around here. Oh, and I want to do like a reaction to this series, but this is his "What on Earth is About to Happen for Heaven's Sake," and it's 7 DVDs. It's a lot of garbage, but that's his eschatology. That's his beliefs
Right.
on the end times,
Yeah.
and it's such an irony and a contradiction that he's building this park, for posterity or posterity, and his theology or his eschatology is that none of us are going to be around. And as a matter of fact, in 2028 is when Kent believes that the final rapture is coming and the total end of the world, and all you guys are gonna get burned up, or
Right.
however
So
the fundamental chicken eating right wing Baptist yahoos say. The hellfire and brimstone try to scare you into religion. That
yeah.
doesn't
So
work, by the way.
what doesn't work?
Scaring people into religion.
Um,
You can't
I think
threaten somebody with something they don't believe in, such as
well,
hell.
I think it works for children. I think that children are particularly susceptible to that kind of thing because as children we kind of like you said, you believe your parents, no
Yeah.
matter what they say, kind of thing. I think that that's a good survival mechanism because of course, as a child, your decisions are not the best, and I will 100% attest to that. Even when you're going through adolescence, your decisions are not 100% the best, but I think that in that adolescence, you're transferring that trust in everything that my parents say to trust in yourself and making your own decisions. And it's an important phase. You've got to be able to make your own good decisions. But I think before that time of adolescence, like before you go through puberty and everything, you really can't make the best decisions yourself. So I
Oh,
think
yeah.
we kind of just
Right.
trust what our parents say.
There's a reason that there's drinking ages. There's a reason that there's
Oh,
voting
absolutely.
ages.
Yeah. Yeah.
You can't trust children to make critical decisions. They just don't have the capacity to do that. Um, but yeah, we have to raise them and teach them. That's our
Yeah.
responsibility.
Yeah, so and no, don't get me wrong, that eschatology, it seems it doesn't make any sense to me. But what would happen if sort of somebody says, no, I'm not working Sundays and Mondays, like I don't want to do that, I'm not doing that. Would there be some kind of either psychologically or physical or sort of some kind of punitive action taken for that kind of attitude?
So, for some odd reason, Kent Hovind seems to attract a lot of people who are in the Jewish roots movement. And one of the tenets of that movement is that they do not work on Saturday. Well, Saturday
Right,
is a work
right,
day at DAL. Saturday's
right.
the big day when guests come in. He wants all his volunteers hard at work. So, this looks
Just
like
an
a
aside,
happening
by
thing.
guess, you mean potential people to work there. Like when somebody says, "Hey, visit Dinosaur Adventureland," I sort of get this feeling of that's a tourist kind of thing. But from
Mhm.
what you said earlier, it's like when he says a guest or a visitor, he's not really talking about a person there to see the park and enjoy it with their. You're talking about potential people to work there.
Right,
So
exactly. And
potential workers.
that's exactly what I experienced because I came as, just a visitor, not even really a guest because I wasn't even planning on staying the night. And I would consider, like a guest as somebody you're gonna have hospitality things and like
Yeah,
feed
yeah.
them and house them. That's what I would consider a guest. So somebody that comes and stays for a night, essentially. I
Well,
went as a visitor. I wasn't even planning on staying longer than just that afternoon.
right.
I ended up staying 3 days, and ultimately became a member of this cult. In fact, I was on one of the CSE, the Creation Science Evangelism Trusts,
Mhm.
which, that's a whole 'nother can of worms in and of itself, because that was. Are you familiar with the $500 million lawsuit against the federal government?
Vaguely, that he sued the government
Yeah,
after he got put in prison for, because he says that they took away his park unfairly and things like that. He sued them for $500 million in order to get the money that was unfairly taken from him back.
yeah. Yeah, so the trust that actually filed that lawsuit was the original trust that was the charter establishment of the original Dinosaur Adventureland in Pensacola. So basically, it's a defunct trust because that place doesn't exist anymore. But
Right, right.
the members were still very much in Kent Hovind's favor, and that would be Glenn Stoll, Paul Hansen, Thomas Dennison, and ultimately myself, because they needed a fourth person on this trust to be able to move forward with that lawsuit. And I was more than happy to join the trust because, hey, this sounds great. We're going to get $500 million for the park, and we're going to be able to build, and this is going to be awesome. But keep in mind, I was still in the cult mindset at this time.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I went from an afternoon visitor to a trustee in a matter of probably 3 months. So yeah, if people come in, if Kent thinks they have potential, if he thinks he can use them, if he thinks they have money some way that he can squeeze out of them, he's going to treat everybody different. Uh, Generally speaking, the people that he gets to stay as volunteers are pretty vulnerable people. I myself was in a very vulnerable position at the time that I visited. I had just gone through a divorce with my wife. Or finalized the divorce with my ex-wife. Just got in custody of my daughter. I had combat vet in my past, dealing with the PTSD stuff at the time. I was doing a lot better at that time. This was 2018, and I got back from Iraq in 2008. So it's been a good bit of time with me
Yeah.
healing and all that. And the thing is,
Yeah.
can't come saying that I'm crazy and was kicked out of the military for that. Like, why did you let me on this trust? You know
Why even
what?
let you
Maybe
in the park if
right,
that's the
right.
case? It
Well, he'll
doesn't
let
make a lot of
anybody in the
sense.
park. He'll let anybody come for the day because he says that.
Well, if it's registered as a homeless shelter, I'd expect there is a lot of people that are homeless who are very vulnerable going through there. As I
Right.
understand it, you weren't homeless at the time,
It's
but
That's on paper. That's on
uh,
paper. I've done some pretty in-depth investigations as far as taxing, or not tax, but like tax paperwork. They did have to file, I think, in 2020, and they filed as a homeless shelter. It's on their
mm,
filing. I don't know where they are now with all that because Ernie's a shyster and he's the one that's behind all that. Uh, Oh goodness, there's so many cans of worms, so many rabbit trails we could go down, Mark. You have no
no, I
idea,
hear
or
that.
maybe
I
you
hear that.
do.
Well,
But
I don't know. I hear a lot from the atheist side, right? I hear a lot from people like Atheist Junior, who's a good friend
sure,
of mine. I hear a lot from a lot of people who've never actually been there. Do you know what I mean? Like, so,
yeah.
um,
So let's do
and
this. I've kind of
yeah,
given my general experience at Dinosaur Adventureland, so I'm sure you have some more specific questions you'd like to ask me. So let's. Is there anything like that you've heard that you want me to confirm or deny or
well, there were a
clarify?
couple of things, but really, I'm looking more at the culture of the place and whether that place is actually, literally a cult. And there's a number of criteria that would sort of put a place like that into a cult. So it's kind of worrying the way you've described how the culture is, even so far to my mind, because when you have a guest at Disneyland or a visitor to Disneyland, they're not looking to recruit that person, right? That's because
Right.
it's portrayed, at least in advertising, as a family friendly amusement park. Essentially, that's how it's portrayed. I don't know what it is on paper. That's a surprise to me that technically on paper it's a homeless shelter, because that's certainly not how it appears to the outsider. But when you have a guest or a visitor at an amusement park, you're not looking, hey, can we get them to work for us? That isn't the intention of the owner. It's, you want to entertain them for a day or a few days or whatever, and then they leave. That's the thing. And so I want to know, like, and don't get me wrong, it is a good thing if a place is taking in people, giving them a place to stay, giving them an opportunity to get out of the situation that they're in. That's a good thing. But what I'm wondering is, how much of an opportunity do people who go in there have in order to change their lives and get out of that place? Like, is it a black hole that gets people in, or is it a place where people can actually change their situation, like if they go in like they're homeless or whatever, and sort of, not be in their situation anymore?
Yeah, it's definitely a black hole. It definitely sucks people in. There's really no, I mean, you're free to come and go as you want, sure, but once you come, Kent basically has a mentality that you can stay as long as you like, but that comes with the caveat of only until like he gets tired of you. So yeah, it is it's interesting to compare it to like Disney World. They're not actively recruiting from their guests, but that is exactly what Kent does. I mean, he's looking for people. He even says it on his broadcast. Come on down, swing a hammer. We've got left-handed ones and right-handed ones. So like it's this whole shtick just to get people to come and work for him so that the donations are coming in, because if you're building this big creationist theme park, you got to have money, and who's going to invest in money if they don't see some kind of progress? So Kent's constantly looking for people to work, and it's a revolving door. Ultimately, it is a black hole in the sense that it's not a place to get back on your feet. It's not a place to develop any kind of character or financial
Right.
stability, but the only real
Is there
positive
opportunity
aspect
to
is that
learn
is you
skills
can go and learn a
that
skill.
right. Okay.
Yeah,
So at
you
least
can learn
that's
a
something.
skill.
Yeah.
You can learn a construction skill. Um,
Okay.
so yeah, there is that positivity of it, but you weren't getting reimbursed for it because volunteers are, well, they're volunteers. They don't get paid. He also uses, for certain people that I guess can convince him well enough that they deserve it, he will make them vendors, so to speak, and then give them put them on a payroll.
So what's a vendor? How does that differ from a volunteer?
So it's just legal nonsense. His way of getting out
Okay.
of withholding taxes. A vendor
Mhm.
is like just somebody who's a entrepreneur. They have their own business. They do their own thing. They're private contractor
Got you.
essentially.
Right, right. I
So
was just about to say a subcontractor. Yeah, got you.
yeah. So the reason he does that is because when he says, you have to be a contractor to get paid, is so that he doesn't have to worry about the taxes. So if he's
Right.
got a
You
bunch
have to
of
worry about, yeah.
right,
Yeah.
if he's got a bunch of contractual employees or whatever, and he treats them like employees, but there's a really furry line or fuzzy line between how you can treat contractors and employees in certain situations. And this is a volunteer-based ministry, so it's even more convoluted because of that. And of course, throw in the homeless shelter, which that's a shell,
Yeah.
that's every bit as much of a shell as their supplement program that they sell, and the vitamin gurus that they promote.
They
It's all just
sell
a shell.
vitamins.
Huh?
They sell vitamins.
Well, they were affiliated with, and he was actually on the board, Bill Sardi, and he's a pretty big name in like holistic medicine. He passed away from COVID, not
Oh,
just a
dear.
couple years ago, but he was on Kent Hovind's board. He had been in trouble for with the FDA and the FTC
Yeah.
actually for promoting some of the fake COVID news, which is
Mhm.
ironic because he ultimately that's how he met his demise.
Yeah.
Which is sad, and I'm not trying to make light of
That
that or
is.
anything like
It's
that, but
tragic.
the irony is worth mentioning.
Yes.
So it to me, what I see Creation Science Evangelism, Creation Science Evangelism Ministries, Creation Science Evangelism Foundation, Creation Science Evangelism Properties, and all the various CSE shell corporations that they have. That's all it is. It's a big shell game to avoid taxes so that they can do whatever they want with this money that they're bringing in. And there is a lot of money. Ernie Land is a lifelong con man, a MLM promoter, and when I bring the supplement stuff into it, and this is not the vitamin.
Yeah.
Bill Sardi was the vitamin guy. The supplements is a business that Steve Lynn and Ernie Land have on the side. But it's a
It
totally
sounds like to me
bogus.
they're sort of adjacent in what my opinion is a con. They're
Yes, it's a
adjacent sort
con.
of.
It's
Yeah.
definitely a con. It's all a big con. I would suspect that there's some money laundering going on there somewhere because of the nature of their supplement website. It's just so clearly bogus and poorly written, and they make some pretty crazy claims. It's like one of those, reduce your age magic
Right.
anti-aging thing.
Yeah.
Just snake oil. The good old
Mhm.
snake oil. It's gonna make you younger. It's gonna make your teeth whiter. Let's put uranium in women's makeup because it lasts longer on their faces. Stuff like that happened in Europe in like the 20s and 30s. Like it's just it's
And
snake
and
oil.
vitamin supplements are
Yeah,
notoriously unregulated.
right.
That's an area that is very
And what's
unregulated.
funny on the anti-aging stuff, if you read through like their legal disclaimers, it actually says this product doesn't do anything. Like
Mhm.
plain and simple, this product doesn't do anything. But they go into great detail about how you can recruit members and sell them product and get commissions, which I mean everybody knows that's just euphemism for a pyramid scheme or
Yeah, so it's a bit.
multi-level marketing. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, MLMs, which are essentially the same, in my opinion anyway.
Well,
Um,
there are some MLM models that are legal, but
well, sure, yeah,
yeah, there
but a
are,
lot of them do
like
get into
Tupperware.
trouble, like, I think it was Nutralife, I think, got into trouble with the structure of their, MLM. There are a few others that got into
Yeah.
trouble about the structure of theirs that were basically, it brings to mind that Simpsons episode when it's like, ours isn't a pyramid scheme. We have the trapezoid. It sort of brings to mind that, to be honest with you.
Well,
Um,
you're probably gonna get a laugh out of this, but theirs is called New Extracts. It
New
sounds just like
extracts.
yeah, it sounds just like the one you brought up.
Yeah, it
Life.
kind of does. Yeah,
Yeah, it's
yeah,
got that
neutral
same
life.
ring to it.
Yeah, okay. Well, I mean, they're all very, very similar in my opinion, but
Right.
you
It's
get
it's
that.
the same model.
And I heard, and if you could confirm for me that sort of people aren't allowed to do like things like they're not allowed to drink even outside of the property kind of thing. Is that true?
Yes, Kent doesn't allow, uh, alcohol, marijuana, any kind of drugs, but he just says that, because if you're Steve Lynn or if you go to Steve Lynn's house, or if you bring drugs for Steve Lynn, he lets it slide. And I want to preface that with supposedly, allegedly, Steve was dismissed from the ministry entirely, so there may or may not still be an affiliation there. But this is I'm talking about from when I was there, my time there. Steve Lynn was a very big player in this whole saga of just lunacy that I lived through.
Sure. Yeah. So Steve Lim was the tech guy, as I understand it, who
Yeah,
also allegedly, or from what I've heard, and this is only what I've heard, I can't confirm or deny
adult
this.
movie
Um,
producer.
I never heard that one, but I did hear that he embezzled some money from Kent, is what I heard. I don't know if that's true.
Yes. So Steve Lynn had an incident where I guess he was having a hallucination because there were supposedly FBI helicopters trying to get him, and he had to steal a truck and drive to Walmart to put gas in it and ended up running around the parking lot and getting arrested. So that was a big deal that Kent really had to do some PR, and he just there was nothing that he could do or say about it. But ultimately, what ended up happening, because Kent and everybody was in a panic, and this was shortly after I left Yale, and this is just stuff that the people that I was still in touch with were telling me. So Kent goes into a panic, and goes to Steve Lynn's house and moves everything out of it and brings it to the
Okay.
DAL property, like everything, his stuff, the ministry stuff, everything, hard drives, his bed, clean the house
Mm.
out. So they had a whole crew go over there. And when they get to Steve's house, they've got like groups of people going in, bringing stuff out, and they discover this room. And one of my friends that was still there in the cult was a part of this, and he sent me this text message, and I didn't know what to think of it. It was like whips, chains, dildos, and studio equipment, BDSM stuff, and that was in Steve Lynn's house. So they cleaned out all of Steve Lynn's stuff, brought it back to Dinosaur Adventureland, and stored it in a Connex. And so yeah, there's some really fishy stuff going on there, but that's how Kent kind of discovered that Steve was embezzling money, because the monetary value of all the stuff that they moved from his house to Dinosaur Adventureland, the guy didn't have any other jobs. He worked for Kent, and he did the website for Ernie's New Extracts. Like
Right.
that was what he did.
Mm.
Um, but he got paid whatever he got paid. I don't know what they paid him, but it was nowhere near the dollar amount worth of things that he had, especially considering he came to Dinosaur Adventureland with literally nothing.
Right.
So
Okay.
he
So
ended
that's
up
yeah.
confessing to having embezzled around $100,000 out of the ministry. And there was talk of him repaying, but I think basically what happened is he gave Kent his Jeep, his fancy lifted, huge mud tires, all the ground effect lights and the bells and whistles. He gave that to Kent, and I think that that was his restitution.
Mm. Okay.
So, yeah,
So
that
yeah,
was a
and
lot.
is that just when they left kind of thing? Is that did he
See, I don't
did he
know
have that
what
then?
their relationship is right now.
Right.
I really don't. I know that Kent has publicly said that Steve Lynn is no longer part. Well, he didn't even say Steve Lynn is no longer part of the ministry. He said somebody that worked for us got into some trouble and they're no longer with us. Well, that was his number one tech guy, the person who probably made the most money off of CSE and was doing all of the online stuff. So it wasn't
Mhm.
just some guy that worked for Kent. It was a very integral part of his organization.
Right. Right. Um, but so he was somebody that was exempt from most of the rules and regulations laid down by Kent, as you were saying.
Oh
But
yeah.
for the average person, was there a lot of this control of what they did off of the property? Like, were you expected to do certain things or not do certain things? Could you, it sounds like you couldn't even, go down to the bar and have a drink, kind of thing. Like, while you were living there.
Right, but there's standards for everybody. In Kent's mind, different standards, because yes, he would totally have a problem with somebody going to a bar, and he did. He kicked a couple of people. One person I know for sure went to a bar because he took my car. I let him borrow my car, and he went to a bar
Mhm.
in New Orleans, and that got back to me, and it got back to Kent, and he wasn't welcome back. But on the other hand, he lets Chris Jones, a tier 3 convicted registered sex offender, bring an
Yes.
11-year-old boy to stay in a house that's just a quarter mile off the property. So there's
Mm,
standards, and they're different depending, I guess, on how much money you give him or how much you kiss his butt. I don't know what his standard is for
mm,
what he determines is allowable for someone to do. Yeah, he'd let Steve Lynn, drink his beer and smoke his pot, but if anybody else did, they were in trouble. And he called him the same as like the garbage man. He's like, Steve can do what Steve wants to do, just like the garbage man that comes and picks up the dumpster every week and go home and smoke some pot if he wants to.
Right.
But if anybody here does that, it's a whole big deal. And the irony there is that Steve was a much more integral member of the organization than anybody who just lived and worked at DAL. But DAL is Kent's public face. When people come to see face to
Right.
face, he wants them to see clean cut,
Yeah.
hardworking, good Christian folks, because that's how he's going to get clean cut, hardworking, good Christian folks to give him money.
Right.
And so, yeah, but Steve Lynn worked behind the scenes. He wasn't on camera, even though he's behind the camera and doing all of the editing, all of the YouTube, all of the websites, all of the uh, donations, et cetera, et cetera.
Mhm.
So, yeah, I think that Kent definitely has some weird standards that he arbitrarily picks and chooses. And I say
Okay.
arbitrarily, but it seems definitely dependent on who kisses his butt most or gives him the most money.
Right. Well, the reason why I'm asking is, have you ever heard of the bite model of
Yes.
cult designation? Yes. So Dr. Stephen Hassan, I think it was, did this model. Have you looked at the criteria at all?
I have, but I'd need some refreshing. I kind of
Okay.
simplify my definition of what a cult is, and I think it's kind of representative. I say they're selective in that they only let certain people in. It's authoritarian in that there's only one person that really runs the show, and it's exclusive in that not everybody is welcome. I say selective. That's what I meant is exclusive.
Yeah,
But
exclusionary.
secretive is another thing, that there's gonna be things that are not spoken of, things that are not talked about in the public, and that's one of the reasons why
Mm,
I'm public enemy number 1, 2, 3, or whatever I am to Kent
because you're
Hovind, is
not.
because I have spoken of these things, and you don't do that in a cult.
Well, so I think, to my mind, cult behavior is a lot more insidious than that. I mean, those things are bad enough in
Sure.
themselves. They would certainly raise questions in my mind. But I think that a cult, its level of control of its members is a factor for me, for my definition. And for Stephen
Mhm.
Hassan's, the bite model, which I generally refer to, that they try to control like who you associate with, who, sort of the way that you think, and they promote a sort of an us versus them mentality, sort of a, hey, these are our people, and
Yep.
we can only trust our people. You can't trust those people who are not part of our sort of circle. There's a lot of control of behaviors. So even if you do leave the cult to go somewhere, you're still not allowed to have personal autonomy to do things by yourself. You have to
Mhm.
follow them. They foster a dependence on the group. Like, you don't have your own money, you don't have your own things. You have to go back to the group for them. And there's a whole series of things. I mean, I can bring it up if you want. I've got it on screen at the moment.
Sure.
Um, yeah, I mean, if you want to go through it, that's fine. But sort of, so it's more, and the questions, and the thing that started me down this road was that I think it was you mentioned you weren't allowed to drink off property, and that's a red flag for me, because that's sort of saying, hey, like, I understand completely if they want to keep a dry property, like they don't want any drugs or alcohol or any substance at all on their property. That's fair. I get that. But when you're sort of telling people that they can't do things outside of that sphere, then
Mhm.
you're getting into cult tech, sort of, territory where you are not allowing people to behave as they want to. You're controlling their behavior. Um,
Right.
and if somebody goes to the town and does something, if there's punishment for how they behave, like back at the property, then that would be another red flag for me. So
Mhm.
really, I'm trying to get an idea of how controlling this apparatus is. Like, how much do they control the lives of their members, kind of thing. um, how much do they require them to be at prayer meetings? How much do they require them to go to these sort of communal things? Because in your ordinary homeless shelter, it would just be, okay, we provide you with a bed, maybe food, you
Mhm.
know, a place to get back on your feet,
A curfew.
you know, right, a curfew maybe, but they wouldn't require you to attend things or do things, or you know, when you're out and about, you know,
Yeah.
you're not allowed to do this, that, and the other. It would be a, you know, well, you have to take care of yourself and make your own decisions, kind of thing.
Yeah, Kent was very authoritarian when it comes to stuff like that. I'd mentioned before that one of the guys did go to a bar and did get drunk and knew because he took my car and he was kicked out. So it was very, very authoritarian in that sense. You know, you do what Kent says or you don't stay. That was the punishment ultimately was you got to go. But what he would do is give people like, you know, you can have 90 days, you got to come back, you got to be sober, or 6 months, and then you can come back and you got to be sober. So he'd let them come back in, but he would ostracize them from the community for whatever arbitrary period of time he chose. Um, he expected me to come back, as a matter of fact,
Right,
and asked me to numerous times after, but, once I was done, I was done, that was it. There was no turning back. I had crossed the Rubicon, no more Kent Hovind for me, you
right.
know? But, you know, he still felt like he had some kind of power over me in that, you know, he's gonna try to influence people's opinion of me since I am willing to talk about my experience there, and that's why
Mm,
he goes on these public tirades about me being a loony bin or a psychopath and suggesting that I'm not fit to be a parent, and then he's
right.
also got his flying monkeys. You know, he sends other people out to attack me. Just today, I was on a stream where I was viciously verbally assaulted by a Hovindite, and that's kind of what we call them nowadays, Lupin, and you're familiar with him. But yeah, it's narcissism at its very core, because that's what narcissists do. They'll malign your character publicly. They'll recruit their friends to do the same, and the whole goal is to basically annoy you into submission or just make you feel like you're so crazy it's not worth it. But you know, I think it's Kent picked a fight with the wrong guy because I am firm in my faith, and I believe that the Bible should be preached faithfully for what it is, and it shouldn't be used as fodder to humiliate people and to disparage others who don't agree with you, and especially not to build a dinosaur adventureland. And that's exactly what he does. He uses the Bible as a prop to convince people of his act, and but that's all it is an act. He doesn't believe this stuff. But I do, and I take offense when somebody uses the Bible that I hold so dearly and tries to manipulate other people with it. Yeah, I don't like that. That pisses me off.
Yeah. Well, I think it makes a lot of people angry, um, especially sort of in the way that he does it. I don't have a dog in that race. I sort of, you know,
Sure.
I'm an atheist, obviously, so I don't,
You
you
don't
know,
say.
yeah, you might have noticed. So I don't have a dog in that race, but I do know a lot of Christians that sort of are upset, and sort of, I have seen him allude to being a prophet before, or at least compare himself
Mhm.
to the prophets of the biblical tradition. I know that does make a lot of Christians mad as well,
I I
because
have a video on my channel. Kent Hovind claims to be a prophet where he outright says, "I'm a prophet. I'm one of God's anointed." So, and he makes prophecies. He says that we're in the end times. This is the great tribulation. It started in 2021. This year is the year that the third temple is supposed to be destroyed, and Jesus is going to come back at the end of the great tribulation. It's supposed to be in 2028, but obviously that's not happening. But he still holds it somehow. I don't know how he holds on to that, but he does.
how much does social guilt play into it? How much do people get? Is there a sort of a systematic sort of ostracization of people that don't follow what Ked wants? Is there sort of this um, vehicle to make people ostracized from the community?
Yeah, well, Kent is that vehicle. You know, if he decides that somebody isn't a good fit, b for whatever reason it may be, whether it be their theology or their opinion or their ability to work for him, he's the one that will ostracize them. He'll start murmuring behind their back and saying, "Hey, I want you to watch this guy for me and tell me, you know, is he working all day?" And
Right.
yeah,
So
it's
yeah, it's more like so the apparatus is really what I'm talking about is, Kent may decide who is to be ostracized, but
mhm.
is there a people that will carry out that and make others in the group aware that this person is, say, in the doghouse, or should be looked down upon negatively, or has done something to invoke the ire of the church, so that they're treated by all of the members in a certain way. That's kind of the apparatus that I'm talking about.
Yeah, and when it comes to Kent, he's an equal opportunity uh employer of flying monkeys is what I like to call him, because he'll use anybody and everybody to take his side for any situation, even in debates. I'm sure you've seen this. He'll turn to the audience for confirmation when he says stuff. And that's how he operates at Dinosaur Adventureland as well, not turning to the audience, but if there's something that he sees as a tort or an offense or something he doesn't like going on, he'll start talking to other people and get that confirmation from them and kind of foment this atmosphere of paranoia about this person who may have the wrong thoughts on doctrine. Like
Mhm.
for example, Mark Rainey, another Mark, bring another Mark into this room.
Why not? Why not?
Yeah, yeah. Mark Rainey believes that Jesus was black, and you know he can believe that. That's fine. I don't think that hurts anybody. But you know Kent didn't like that, so behind Mark Rainey's back, he would talk about Mark Rainey and his black Jesus, and he would just kind of huff it off like it was just crazy. But he would do it in a way that like he's getting your confirmation there, so he's really building that just air of suspicion and paranoia about the other person. And flat earthers were like that too. People that were
Oh, you
flat
had
earthers.
flat earthers there.
Oh yeah, yeah. A lot of flat earthers
Oh.
are attracted there. A lot of conspiracy theorists. A lot of surprisingly, a lot of Hebrew roots movement folks. It seems
Mhm.
like he attracts everybody except well-founded biblical Christians. It's
Right.
mostly just the fringes that he brings in. Now, that's not to say that some haven't slipped through the cracks and wound up there. Of course, they have. He's had lawyers come. He's had doctors, actual doctors, stay and live there. People that have lived very storied lives. One gentleman that I was fascinated with uh, actually started churches at NASCAR events in the 60s. So like it was a very interesting and I was a NASCAR fan growing up, so that was kind of a big deal for me. You know, Bill Frazier was his name. And so he invites anybody and everybody. Uh it's and just like any cult, any kind of brainwashing thing, it's not so much the level of intelligence that someone has that makes them susceptible to these kind of delusions, but it
Mm.
is, you know, it's much more than that. Could a person be in a vulnerable position? Are they at a point in their life where they're really seeking answers and they're hearing what they want to hear, that confirmation bias? So anybody can succumb to that. Anybody can succumb to confirmation bias.
Sure.
That's across the board. But
Yeah.
yeah, the generally speaking, the people that he attracts are very vulnerable.
Mm. And so, um he sort of has these people, and he has this apparatus for sort of shaming them. Is there anything else that goes on? Is there any other punishments that would be corporal in nature, or sort of making people uncomfortable, or making people so by corporal I mean, is there any kind of physical punishments,
No.
taking away food, taking away certain comforts that they would have?
No, it's much more psychological.
Okay.
But even in saying that, he goes on these rants about, people are taking too long of showers. You should take a shower in 90 seconds or 3 minutes or whatever he says. I think he says he can take a shower in 90 seconds, but you shouldn't take more than 3 minutes. So there's kind of that. And I guess that would be, in a sense, a corporal punishment for waste, that he's going to shame you publicly, because he does. He shames people publicly about taking too long of showers.
Well,
And
no,
that's
I mean, really what I'm talking about is sort of, if you don't think the same way, I'm going to take away, you can only have this shower for X amount of time. That isn't really a punishment. It's just a weird, universal request to people, which is kind of strange, but
sure, fair enough. Well,
yeah,
yeah,
not really a corporal
absolutely. There,
punishment.
there is there's one thing that he does have power over, is their home. Like, we're talking, a lot of these people give up everything to come live at Dinosaur Adventureland. Some people didn't have anything when they got there, and Dinosaur Adventureland is their home, it's their community, it's their livelihood, their sustenance. So he can take that right out from under their feet, and that right there is probably worse than, hey, you got to skip a meal if you don't make it a Bible study. Oh,
Oh,
you know what? Okay, he does do this. So ice cream, sometimes he'll have ice cream after Bible studies, and he doesn't announce it to anybody unless they're in the Bible studies. And then also going out to eat after his sermons, his Sunday services. If you don't attend, you don't get to go to the Chinese buffet. So stuff like that, yeah, that happens. But he's not gonna
right.
starve you, or put you on extra duty or anything like that.
Okay. A few questions come in. What I might do first off, I'll just show quickly. And so this is what I've generally work off. Hold it, this Zoom is terrible. Is the bite model on, and
Mhm.
there's a long criteria there.
Yeah,
But
that's why I like to
you
simplify it.
yeah, no, I get you. So a lot of these, from what I know, were red flags for
Mhm.
what I know about the part. Sort of, so financial dependence, for instance,
Yep.
um, sort of permission required for major decisions,
Mhm.
rewards and punishes used to modify behaviors. So and
So,
discouraging,
one
sort of
comes to
rules and
mind:
regulations.
permission for major decisions. Even minor decisions, you have to have level of permission. So, cell
Can you give
service
an
at
example? Oh, yeah,
yeah,
sorry, go ahead.
cell service at DAL is pretty spotty, and I was a resident there, so I wanted to have internet access and good cell service, but it was pretty
Sure.
bad. So I got a cell booster, a cell signal booster,
Mhm.
and was going about installing it, and Steve Lynn caught wind of that, and he didn't like it, so he talked to Ken about it, and Kent told me, it's like, "Well, you have to approve that with Steve before you do it." And I'm like, "No, I don't. I paid for it. This
No,
is
yeah,
my service. This is something that this company provides to me as a service, and I'm gonna use it. You can't tell me I can't." But
yeah.
yeah, even on little stuff like that, he gets really paranoid about what people are doing. So he wants to know every little thing that's going on for sure,
So
so that
so
he
let me
can
get this
approve.
straight. You got a mobile service internet, which is just a connection to the tower,
Hmm.
over a mobile service. So you're not even
Yeah,
using the infrastructure that is on DAL. You've got your own cell modem, you've got your own cell connection to a
right,
tower that is providing you internet service. And he still didn't want to allow that.
right. Well, Kent's
Wow.
very technologically illiterate. He doesn't have a clue
I've
when it comes to
noticed.
this stuff. But Steve kind of is, and Steve liked to keep Kent really paranoid, because Steve really liked to have the sense that he was in control and he was running the show. He kind of played Kent like a puppet, to be honest. Steve
Right.
Lynn was a tech guy, and he didn't allow anybody to have access to the internet, the infrastructure that they had at DAL, and it wasn't always that way. And the way it came about that he restricted everybody's internet access is kind of a wild story. So Kent had this meeting one morning at breakfast, and he was telling everybody that the Scientologists that had visited the previous month or so were actually spies, and they were there to plant listening devices and bugs. And he told everybody at this meeting to be on the lookout for a he it was Netgear 11 was the signal it was putting out, and he was telling everybody he wanted everybody to find the source of this Netgear 11. And he had people on the roof of the science center. He had people opening up holes in the walls to look for this source of whatever Netgear 11 was, and he called it a bug. He was telling everybody that the science center was bugged.
By
So
who?
this went
Why?
on. Say again?
By who and why?
The Scientologists.
Oh,
But yeah, there was never an explanation as to why, other than they're just Scientologists. You know, the Tom Cruise people, that kind of thing. There was never really a satisfactory explanation, but that's just what it was, and that was a reason for Kent's paranoia. So we had been looking for this Netgear 11 for several days, if not a week. And Cindy was getting frustrated with it too, because it was just consuming Kent. He was so paranoid about the Scientologist, and he was even telling stories about, I thought they were kind of suspicious because they really look like military guys, like maybe they're with the government. So this was going
okay.
on for a few days, and I knew it was a Wi-Fi signal, because when you open up, your Wi-Fi list on your phone, it's going to list the available networks, and there it was, Netgear 11. So I knew it wasn't some kind of bug or listening device or anything. It was outputting a signal as a
Well, you could
Wi-Fi signal.
tell. You could
Yeah,
easily
you can
tell
tell.
due to the frequency that it's on. Like
Right, right,
802.11
exactly.
is usually the
And
Ethernet.
so one evening, this was after one of the Bible studies, I was heading back to my cabin, and Cindy was in the office, and she was upset, and she was distraught. I think she slammed some papers down and probably cussed under her breath. I don't know, but I noticed that she was distraught. And I
Mm.
go in there and say, Cindy, what's going on? And she's like, I cannot find this Netgear 11. Kent's going crazy about it. He won't shut up about it. I just don't know what to do. And I said, "Well, do you think it's in here?" And she's like, "Yes, I think it's in here. This is where the signal's the strongest." I said, "Okay, well, it's a Wi-Fi router. That much I know. So what we need to do is turn the lights off and look for a flashing light, because that's what modems and routers and that sort of thing they do. They have little flashy lights to let you know they're working."
Sure.
And lo and behold, there was under and behind this piece of plywood that was haphazardly screwed to a desk to kind of mask the space behind it, was from underneath it was a little flashy green light. I'm like, there it is.
And it was a
And
Netgear router. Yeah, of course
yeah,
it
yeah,
was.
it was a
Yeah.
Netgear router, and I pulled it out. I pulled the desk out. I got the router. I unplugged it. Netgear 11 went away. I plugged it back in. Netgear 11 reappeared,
Yeah.
and I took the router straight to Kent's house with Cindy. And I said, Kent, here's your bug. It's a Wi-Fi router. And
Was it
he got,
actually plugged into any kind of like, was it actually connected to any kind of internet service, like
oh, I don't know.
phone line, fiber optic
That I
system?
don't know, because I didn't have the password to it.
No, no,
Uh,
no. But you unplugged it. What was it?
yes.
Was plugged into
Oh yeah,
power, obviously.
it was plugged into the power and to an Ethernet cable. So it was like outputting a signal from, it was plugged into the router wherever the router was. I don't know where they get the router, but that was just the thing with the antennas, the Wi-Fi.
That that oh,
Yeah,
okay. So it was yeah, okay. So it was a router. No, the modem is the thing that connects to the actual internet, like it's a
right,
modulator, demodulator.
right.
The router will be what is distributing the network. So either that or it was a Wi-Fi repeater, maybe. But then you'd have a Wi-Fi signal to start off with. So it's
Yeah,
probably
and then,
unlikely to be so.
but I knew that was the source of it, because when I
Yeah, yeah,
unplugged
sure.
it, it went away. Plugged it back in, it reappeared, and then I took it up to Kent and I said, "We got it." And he gets all big eyed, like he's excited, like this mystery solved. And he tells Cindy to call the sheriff, because here's this
Oh,
bug that we've
really?
been looking for that was planted by the Scientologists, and we have evidence of it now. So Cindy's on the phone with the sheriff telling them what's going on. Kent's like, "Don't touch it, don't touch it. You'll get fingerprints on it. We need them to fingerprint it." And all while Cindy's on the phone with the sheriff, Kent calls Steve, and Steve goes nuts. He starts talking about, "I've ruined the camp security. That was the camera Wi-Fi system hub or whatever. Now I've put Dinosaur Adventureland at risk because you can't work the camera security system." It was just this whole big thing, and he convinced Kent that I was lying to him about the bug in the Netgear 11, and that wasn't actually it. And Kent bought it, and I'm just sitting there dumbfounded. I'm like, I literally proved it to myself and Cindy that that's what the source was, and here Kent
Yeah.
is, saying, "No, it's not," because Steve knows everything. And the very next day, Kent had this, he had the idea to give me the "I'm the general, you're the private" speech, which didn't set well with me because he's never served in the military, and I have. He's not my general. I'm a very independent person. Even though I was in the
Sure.
cult, I still considered myself, you know, an independent
Yeah.
minded person. And
Autonomous agent. Yeah, yeah,
yeah,
absolutely.
yeah.
Yeah.
And I didn't like, I noticed things were wrong with Kent and things that were going on there, but there was something about it that just something in my mind that just couldn't not excuse it. Even though
Mm.
I would realize something, "Hey, this is wrong," I would always justify it. And I don't know how that works. I don't know what the function in the human mind is that leads you to what's cognitive dissonance is what it is, essentially. It's
Well,
when
yeah, it can cause that, sure. Yeah.
yeah. But the
Yeah.
things that I was seeing did not line up with what I thought they should. And
Well, I think that's just normal human justification. Like, we justify a lot of things with
yeah,
bad justifications. We all do that. We might have a friend that behaves really badly, and we say, "Oh, well, most of the time he's a good person," or whatever. That doesn't excuse their behavior. We kind of justify it to ourselves. So I think
yeah.
I think a lot of that can be done. Sure, that's normal.
Right, right. And made this commitment. I left my job, I left my home, I left a lot of stuff behind to be a part of this movement, I guess, this creationist movement. And Kent Hovind was, my ticket to be a part of it. So I was happy to excuse a lot, but it got to a point where it was just inexcusable.
Yeah,
One of the biggest, most impactful things for me was when Stephen Alexander drowned in the lake, and that was
the
traumatic.
young boy.
Yeah, that was traumatic
Yeah,
in and of itself, but it was an
yeah.
accident. It was a total freak accident. Nobody knows exactly what happened. I think he was running alongside the dock and fell, slipped his head, and fell in the water. But I don't know because I didn't see it. But uh, as far as how Kent handled that,
Mm.
that was when I really had to take a step back and say, "Wait a minute, what's actually going on here?" Because at the hospital, when they finally got Steven to the hospital, the family's grieving. Their son's dead. He was dead on arrival, and there was nothing they could do about it. I mean, we worked really hard on Steven with CPR and trying to revive him, but he was in the water too long.
Yeah.
And it was too long. So Kent at this hospital with traumatized people, not just the family who's grieving, but people who lived this trauma. He's handing out
So sorry for the parents.
his
Mm.
pamphlets for his park and inviting people to come on down to Dinosaur Adventureland and doing his normal shtick, his little dad jokes and everything. And it's just, how do you act like that in not just in the near proximity of a tragedy, but right in the midst of it, in literally in the emergency room with the family and other people that were there. And he's so flippant about this just, there's no emotion, there's no feeling. And then to top that off, the sheriff and some other people from the government did show up to investigate and interview people that were there. And Kent was, as soon as Kent found out they were there, he was telling everybody to not speak to them. Don't speak to the authorities. let Paul Hansen deal with this. Don't talk to anybody, which I thought that was the stupidest thing in the world. And I talked to him. I let him talk to my daughter because she was there. But just the gall to, act that way in the midst of the tragedy, and then afterwards, all he's doing is trying to cover his tracks, and then to go live a few days later and try to blame Robert Beatty for, it being a story, like, eh, trying to paint Robert Beatty in a bad light because that happened and he reported on it, and it's just
Was
none
there
of that
any
said.
was there any review of safety precautions, any kind of internal investigation into how it could have happened, any kind of policy shift that would make it a safer place in the wake of the tragedy, or was it all just damage control?
It was a lot of damage control, but, oh gosh, this is gonna sound so, like, anticlimactic, but they did, tie off, like, the deep end of the lake in the swimming area with, like, a rope with some floaty things, and they made the life jackets more accessible and cleaned up the
Okay,
pavilion. But,
at least
yeah, there
that's
were some
something.
steps
Yeah.
taken, but,
Okay, good.
uh there should have been more steps taken, in my opinion. I think that there should have been a designated lifeguard for any time anybody was at the lake, and I brought that up with Kent, and it was just, he's got signs out in the place that say they're not liable for anything that happens. They don't have insurance. You enter at your own risk, that sort of stuff.
Yeah.
But, all of this was compounding on me and weighing on me, and I got the sense that I had to leave long before I actually left. It was probably, 6 to 9 months before I left that I was really starting to contemplate what I was doing there, what this was really all about. How can I justify, all these things that are going on? And I couldn't anymore. And I made
Is
my
that the
ultimatum.
dissonance, sort of
Yeah,
the
that was
I
the
think of
cognitive
this,
dissonance.
yeah, yeah,
Absolutely. And I kinda made my ultimatum. I made it very clear. We had a whole camp meeting about Chris Jones coming, and this was after, the child that he brought, and we did have a meeting and internal talk about all that, and I said, "Look, this can't happen. Chris is
right,
registered. He can't be here. That's my line in the sand. If he comes back, I have to leave. Like this is not optional for me. This is putting way too much stress on me. It's putting way too much risk on my daughter and the children here. I'm not going to just voice my opinion and then let bygones be bygones. There's consequences if this continues to happen, and that consequence was me leaving. And I was a valuable member of the community. I was a trustee. I was one of the heavy equipment operators, construction worker. I gave tours. Kit really trusted me to do a lot.
mm,
And for me to say this is my last straw was kind of a big deal for them. And not long after I left, there was really kind of a mass exodus of the volunteers that were there at the time. Just one by one, they slowly just started leaving or getting kicked out. And, I don't want to say I led the charge in that, but I think that there's a lot to be said for, the bystander syndrome. And the first person to
yeah.
jump in the action, that's when other people are going to join. So,
And I
I mean,
think it happens that way in a lot of these manipulative places. One person puts
yeah.
their foot down and another person says, well, they follow the lead. No, I totally get you.
And I
Um,
didn't make a big scene of it, I didn't make a bunch of fuss
yeah,
about it. I just packed everything I had and left.
but Kent
So,
did.
yeah, Kent made a big fuss about it, and he still does to
Yeah,
this day.
yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm sorry to bring all of that up. I
No, it's
have
good.
got a few questions through from the audience, if that's okay with
Oh,
you.
absolutely.
Yeah, so IC Spin, thank you so much. Gave a US $1.99, so $2 donation. Are there rules only for people that live on campus? And I suppose I was sort of asking, are there people who don't live on campus that are part of the ministry? I guess is the first part
Yes.
of that question. Do they have the same expectations as those who live on campus? Like they're not allowed to drink, they're not allowed to do certain things, or do they can do whatever they?
Well, I mean, yeah, they're allowed to do whatever they want, up to and including diddling kids. So Kent doesn't care.
Okay, that's
If you
just
don't want me to
cool.
go like to that level, I can definitely restrain myself. But it's just what it is. Brady Byram is on his board currently. Chris Jones is welcome anytime, and these are men who
Mm,
have. uh, Chris Jones has convictions. Brady Byram, of course, they're allegations, but they're very serious allegations from the victims. That I mean, their
yeah.
family decided not to press charges, but if those men are allowed to be on the board, and Kent doesn't ask them what they do at home. Kent doesn't ask them if they're drinking at night. It's a much more localized control uh
Mhm.
metric that Kent sees. Kent sees what's in front of him. Like, the only time he ever even thinks of his board is when he needs them to pull the wool over someone's eyes, or to harass them, or to approve, like, whatever money he's demanding they give him or to spend. And it's a board of yes man. So, um, yeah, there's definitely different standards for people that are
Can
there
he
and people that are
remove
not.
people from the board if he wants?
Can he remove them?
Yeah.
All willy-nilly? Well, he says, "I was not ever on the trust," which isn't the same board as his board of directors currently. But, he just like he dissolves his marriages, he just waves a magic wand and says, "I'm not married to you anymore, Joe. Not married to you more, any Mary. Not married to you more, any Cindy," and moves on with the next one.
Mhm.
None of this stuff matters to Ken. It's just what he says. He lives in his own world, and he's the king of the castle.
Okay. And yeah, so that answers that question. Again, IC Spin sends in another $1.99, $2 super chat. Thank you so much, IC Spin. Is there special treatment or benefits for tenure? So I guess he's talking about the people that have been there a long time. Are there special benefits they get for being there,
Hmm.
over a certain period of time?
See, that's an interesting question, and the answer, in short, is yes and no, because it's really a revolving door of volunteers, and there's very few people that are considered to have what you're saying tenure. Um, and it really doesn't play into how long you've been there. It's more of your tenacity of supporting Hovind in anything and everything he says. So the more you kiss your butt, the more reward you'll get. And those rewards can be, a nicer cabin, um, easier jobs, different positions, or maybe bring you onto the trust, stuff like that.
So is it more compliance and sort of differentiation, like sort of so conforming that will get you these special treatments rather than the amount you put in, like the time you put in, or the money that you put in, um, or does it mean a mix of all of them?
Oh, yeah.
How does
Well,
that
I
work?
was actually just about to say that it really is a mix of all that.
Right.
He really admires hard work, and I can appreciate that. And he'll brag on you if you work hard. He'll bring you up on his live streams at night in the Bible say and say, "Look how smooth the road is. Thanks, Mark." That sort of thing. Kind of pat you on the back publicly, and that's a big reward. But um, as far as like people who donate money, they're the most important, of course.
Mm,
And tenure, it's like longevity within the cult. Yeah,
yeah.
they just become like a fixture, more or less, and in ways untouchable. You don't. It's like you don't like the whole "don't touch my anointed." They kind of inherit that by osmosis of being Kent's yes men. For example, the cooks. The cooks don't participate in the Bible studies. The family that does the cooking, they don't have to go to Bible studies, but you know, not only do the visitors and the guests and the volunteers have to go, but Kent's going to snap at them in the middle of the show to tell them to pay attention. And you got some
Yeah.
young teenage girls in the back looking at their phones and giggling. He's going to bring them to
Mm.
the front row and tell them to shut up and shape up.
Yeah, I did see that in one of his broadcasts. I think I did a review on that. It was pretty shocking.
Yeah, that bothered me
Yeah.
too.
Um, how much? So, but does it matter how long the tenure is? Like, if you still adamantly disagree with Kent, does it matter of your tenure? Can you get away with that, or is that something that's always, no matter how long you've been there, a big no-no?
Well, uh, the biggest issues I had with Kant were in like theology and doctrine, and those are some pretty big things to have. And of course, he would use those at his disposal if he needed to kick you out as an excuse. Well, oh, he was preaching Black Jesus, or they were preaching too much flat Earth, or this or that. But I'm sorry, could you repeat the question? I'm kind of starting to
Um,
get sidetracked.
Well,
I know.
no, totally understandable. We've covered it, like we've gone through a whole lot, so don't worry, totally understand. It's does a long-term tenure make you immune to kind of the repercussions of questioning and disagreeing hardly with Kent? And you sort of said, yeah, most of the disagreements are on scriptural stuff.
hmm So yeah, I don't think Kent really puts much value into doctrine and actual beliefs of people, although he will use it against people if he needs to, because he
Mm.
lets the flat earthers stay, he lets the Black Jesus guy stay, he lets the preterists and the Calvinists stay, so long as they're contributing in a tangible way, like you're
Okay.
working every day, you're giving money, you're buttering Kent up. So yeah, there is definitely that going on.
So it seems like the problem is if you disagree with Kent policy-wise rather than scriptural-wise.
Yeah, much more so. It's more of about appearances. So Kent
Mm,
doesn't want his minions to appear to be in discord, and that's one of the biggest things he likes to use. Um, is and this is spiritual abuse. He'll say you're sowing discord among the brethren. You're leading Korah's
right.
rebellion, which these are the Korah is a biblical figure from scripture that led
Mhm.
rebellion, and he tries to put individuals in a really shameful spot because they're the ones that are at fault because Hovind is upset.
Yep.
You said something Hovind didn't like, so you're leading Korah's rebellion. And that
Mm.
kind of spiritual abuse, it really hurts. It really
Right,
does.
right.
Because if you're there
Because
trying to,
yeah.
do the right thing, and this is where this is what really got me. I was really trying to help Hovind out with
Mm,
his doctrine and his theology and some of his views that were just so obviously incongruent with the Bible, with scripture. But he was so dismissive of it. He didn't want to hear it. If I would bring anything like that up, it was, "Oh, hey, well, yeah, I got stuff to do, busy, 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 got phone calls," or he would just take a phone call right in front of you. And you kind of get used to that dismissive attitude from Kent, but you never really get over, you know, I'm trying to matter here. I'm trying to make a difference, and that
right.
just complete lack of appreciation or recognition, it sucks. And I think he uses that against people to keep them trying to gain that recognition and to gain that appreciation from Kent because he's the top dog. He's Kent Hovind.
And
He's the
sometimes you're
David
trying to
Koresh. He's the Jim
help
Jones.
him, right?
Yeah,
Sometimes you're trying to, like, so with the Chris Jones stuff, you're trying to help him because that was a disaster for
absolutely.
everybody concerned, like, and I suppose that is a big thing, that you're trying to help him not to fall into these holes, but the man just wants to dive down it. I don't
Yeah.
know what else you can do, but
Well, he's
I
like
can
a pig.
imagine
He loves
how
to roll in the mud.
well, I can imagine how upset you'd be compared to a biblical villain. Being a
Yeah.
Christian, you want to be one of the good people, not. And I can't imagine how that would affect you.
That's one of Kent's problems is no, I don't want to be a character in the Bible. I'm not. I'm Mark Stoney. The Bible characters are the Bible characters, and we have to separate ourselves from them, or we don't
Mm,
get their stories as they're meant to be portrayed. You can't insert yourself into an ancient text and expect to, be able to compare, our 21st century life with microwaves and cell phones and internet
right.
to what they experience. It's the wrong way to go about it. So, but Kent loves to do that. He loves to insert himself into scripture. He loves to compare himself to Jesus and to to Moses and all this, but you'll never catch him comparing himself to Barabbas. You'll never catch him comparing himself to Korah. Like you'll never, ever, ever. But he's quick to do that to others, while he's putting himself up on this pedestal that he's like some kind of he's got a persecution complex, because he's always saying, well, they did this to Jesus, and Paul wrote his letters from prison, and they killed Jesus because but that's not this. They killed Jesus because he claimed to be God. And here we have Kent, that I honestly think he has a hard time differentiating himself from the actual God that he says he represents, because when it really comes down to it, Kent worships himself. He values his own time. He values his own opinion, nobody else's. And that's just what you get with Hovind. I mean, it is what it is, and it's disgusting, but if that's what you're going to subject yourself to, you shouldn't expect anything different.
No, that's fair. I want to give a big thank you to Robin Webster, who's a sort of really supportive member of the channel, gifted what I'm calling a readership, and hit Peter Guns. So Peter, congratulations! Enjoy your emotes and stuff, courtesy of the lovely Robin Webster. The next question is from IC Spin again. IC Spin's just hammering you, Mark. I'm sorry, but that's the name of the game. He wants to know more about the monument for the child. As I understand it, the family paid for the entire expense. So I think he's talking about the gazebo at the end, and the plaque up. So did the family pay for all of that, or was it partly done by the ministry? What happened there?
I don't know how that was all financed. I really don't. But what I do know is that the father had been in communication with Kent, and I'd been speaking to him too. And Kent's been wanting a gazebo. He's been wanting a gazebo on the end of his dock for a long time. And Kent actually asked him if he could donate to build the gazebo in memory of his son. That's what he asked Randall, that's the boy's father. So they had it all planned out, and Randall was going to donate for the gazebo. I don't know if like I said, I don't really know how the finances went down behind it, but I know that the day Randall had scheduled to come and build the thing, Kent had forgotten about it. Kent had forgotten that he was coming. He forgot that was the day. Nothing was ready. All the workers had already been put on their chores for the day. And then when Randall showed up and he's ready to go on this construction, there's no building material. I don't know if Randall had donated ahead of time, but ultimately Randall had to go to the hardware store and pick up the lumber for the gazebo. And Kent had to halt all the work for the day because he had already put everybody on their tasks and reroute everybody to the gazebo, because he had not he had planned it but had kind of forgotten about it, I guess. So
because he says the family paid for it. That's what he says. I've heard him say that.
Maybe they did.
Yeah.
But if whether they paid for it twice, I can't say, because
no, that's okay. If we don't know, we don't know.
I just know that they showed up and there were no building materials, and Randall went and bought a bunch of building materials, like $900 worth of lumber.
The family could have paid for that. It's not,
sure. Yeah, very well they could have. Kent may have paid for some of it. But the thing is, that gazebo we weren't even supposed to build it, but it was designed, it was constructed and finished in one day, which was just absolutely incredible how that happened.
That's pretty good. Yeah, that's
it really, and it's a fairly well constructed gazebo. But you had a bunch of guys that are construction workers. That's what they do. They build things, and when you got a team of people building things, you can build it pretty quick.
Yeah.
It was kind of ironic, though, morbidly ironic, that during the building of that gazebo, there were quite a few falls into the water from people building it.
Oh dear. Oh,
But
that's
nobody got hurt.
OSHA would probably have issues Is there any insurance for
No,
people if they do?
no,
So if
none
somebody
whatsoever.
is hurt,
Nope. There are actual signs on the property that say we do not carry insurance, enter at your own risk. All over
but
the
I mean,
place.
for the people working and volunteering
Nope.
there,
Nope.
really?
None at all.
Okay, that's definitely. Do they know that if they're hurt, they're basically on their own? Do they get anything to, do they have a agreement with the park that they won't sue the park if they get help hurt working at the park? Is there any
Well,
kind of
actually, yeah. So when somebody comes in as a volunteer, they have to, well, I guess it's kind of selective because I didn't fill out any paperwork or
mm,
random or whatever. But supposedly they get a background check and um what else? Again, I'm losing my train of thought at this point because
yeah,
not
no,
because
I
of your
totally
stream. I was on a
understand.
6-hour stream earlier,
Yeah, no, I get that. That's perfectly okay.
but I'm still here. I might be only on
Yeah.
7 cylinders though.
So I think Human Girl said best. Do they sign a waiver of some
No.
sort? Is there
Oh,
some?
yes, yes, yes. No insurance,
Yeah.
but yeah, they sign a waiver for it. And Kent claims to have people signing NDAs, but I never saw anybody sign an NDA
Okay.
either.
That's a red flag for me as well when you're asking people to sign an NDA working for you in a non-sensitive area. Like
Exactly.
that's really weird.
It's not like you're
Anyway,
guarding
I'll
corporate
move.
gold secrets.
Yeah, I'll move on quickly. So IC Spin again used his member chat. Any major different views on scripture than Kent? So I think he's asking you if there. Do you have major scripture differences?
Yes, quite a few actually. I don't really know how to name Kent's position on eschatology other than completely wackadoodle, but I am a premillennial preterist when it comes to eschatology. Soteriology, Kent is very Arminian, although he claims to be neither that nor Reformed, whereas I am Reformed theology, Calvinistic, take a systematic theology approach to Scripture. Uh,
So
let's
just run us
see.
through that just quickly. So a preterist is somebody that thinks that the scripture was fulfilled first century, in the time of Peter. Is that right?
Yes, so a preterist, there's different degrees of preterism. Everybody that calls himself a Christian is to a degree a preterist because preterism in its essence just means that there is a past fulfillment to prophecy, past to
Right.
us. So
Okay.
if somebody believes that Jesus came in the flesh and was born of a Virgin Mary, they're a preterist on that.
Okay.
But in an eschatological sense, a preterism is somebody that believes that the timing and the nature of the second coming were not to be this cataclysmic world-ending event, but rather the judgment on unbelieving Israel for killing their king, and that was their judgment. And it was
Okay.
also the end of the Jewish relationship with God directly, the way He dealt with them, and only exclusively, not directly, or well, directly and exclusively with the Jews. It's opened up to every nation, tribe, language, tongue, etc., etc. So, yeah, Kent believes that we're living in the last days.
Yeah.
He believes
End
that,
times.
yeah. Excuse you.
And I think he said before that the end will come in his lifetime. So that's sort of a prediction that
Sure.
he's made. But
Yeah.
he's sort of been saying this for a very long time that the
Mhm.
end's just around the corner, kind of thing.
Right. And he claims that he shifted his end times belief at some point, and that's basically the only time he's ever changed his mind on something. But I don't know because I feel that both of his positions were wrong. So that doesn't really mean anything to me when he changes from one wrong position to another. I like to go to the scripture. I like to look at the historical context, what was going on in the world at that time. And the first century was a very tumultuous time,
Sure.
especially towards the end of it.
Mm.
And I think that the spiritual prophetic events that are laid out in scripture were carried out in during that time, and we weren't looking for an actual end of the world, the end of all time. The world would have been the Roman Empire, the known world at that time. And the end was the end of the old covenant, in which God was only dealing with Jews with the temple and sacrifice, and the ushering in of the new covenant. And that's the covenant of grace, which we're in now. So Kent and I definitely differ on some pretty important topics. And as far as I was mentioning Calvinism and Arminianism, Kent says he's neither, but he's definitely Arminian because he's very much in the free will camp. And to say free will versus Calvinist is kind of a misnomer, because Calvinists believe in free will. We say we don't have deterministic free will. We say God has that ultimate deterministic will and permissible will, because, well, Scripture says he declared the end from the beginning, so his will can't be thwarted. God's will is supreme over man's. But Kent would argue with that, and would contrive that unbelievers can, on their own fruition, just decide to leave their unbelief and become elect on their own. But that's not what I believe, and it's definitely not what Scripture believes. Jesus said to his disciples, "You did not choose me, but I chose you." There's plenty of words like predestinated, foreknowledge, and all that sort of thing. But those are dirty words to Kant, because that flies in the face of his sovereign man theology, which ties into his sovereign citizen nonsense. I mean, it's Kent's a big ugly web of just weird things, but they're all intertwined and connected, and really the root of it is his sovereign man theology. Like, he's the big daddy, he's in charge of all of his ultimate outcome, everything that happens around. He's got complete autonomous control over it, not just himself, but everything around him. And that's how he feels, that's how he thinks he's entitled to that kind of power and authority, and he wields it, and in pretty nasty ways.
Pinworm just sent in a member chat. Thank you so much for your support, Pinworm. I really appreciate it. And they wrote, "Proud channel member." So yeah, I think that's proud channel member. But I just love the way you wrote it. It sounds like a child. So I love that. Proud channel member.
That's funny.
Fantastic. Yeah, no,
I saw one in your chat that kind of made me chuckle. Somebody asked me if I wanted to debate Brett Keane.
Well, they asked me if I want to interview Brent Keane, and it's like, yeah, it depends on the topic. I know.
Oh, they could have been talking to you. Sure.
Yeah. But what would you think? Would you debate Brett Keane?
Brett Keane runs from me. At the mere sight of me, he will leave a room. He can't be there with me. Same with Kent. They won't let me interact with them in any way, shape, or form. And that's fine. Whatever.
Yeah, sure.
But, it's not like that's a fair.
Well, I think that if you do disagree with somebody and you're being honest about it, I think you ought to be able to confront them face to face, kind of thing, and say to them,
Sure.
"Hey, this is why I won't debate you," or "This is why." I think so. Yeah, maybe I'm wrong. Maybe people have different opinions of that. That's my opinion anyway. Let's see. I did also have a question from Dolores Claiborne. I'm sorry if I mispronounced that. Perhaps someone in a similar group feels like leaving that group would be a nightmare experience. How does it feel being on the other side of a group like this?
It's good. I'm much wiser for the experience that I've been through. I'm much more cautious about getting involved in anything similar to that. I'm not saying I'm immune, but I'm definitely more cognizant of these types of things, these cults, and this mentality that people can get dragged into. As far as getting out, it's not easy to break that mindset, that cult mindset. It's really not, because when you put so much of yourself and your efforts and your time, your money, blood, sweat, and tears into something,
Yeah.
it becomes part of your identity, and when you leave, you feel like you've
Mm.
lost part of that.
Well,
I
you know that's what it's there for. It's to have your identity be a part of this organization.
Right, exactly.
Yeah.
And that just goes into the depth of how these guys, these charismatic cult leaders, or
Mm.
even if they're not quite to the degree of a cult, but these just charismatic people that can manipulate anybody just about.
Yeah.
I mean, none of us are
We're
immune
all
to.
vulnerable. Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. No, I absolutely believe that. Was there a bit of sort of did you go through a sunk cost fallacy? Did you go through thinking, well, I've put so much of my time in, all that'll be for waste if I leave now kind of thing? Was that
Yeah.
something that went through
Oh
your
yeah.
head?
Yeah, I invested
Right.
quite a bit of time there. I was there for around 2 years. I mean, that's not a huge amount of time. That's 2 years. That's significant
Yeah.
time.
Oh
Nobody
yeah.
wants to throw 2 years away, throw
Mm.
2 years of their life away. But that's what everything I was about for those 2 years was, centered around Dinosaur Adventureland, and justifying my existence there. And yeah, it was
Yeah.
tough. It was really, really tough. But uh, my line in the sand was much more important than I could have been there for 50 years. And if that pedophile stuff had continued, and which it did, I
I
would have
know.
left.
Yeah.
I would have left the same.
Yeah. No, that's fair. A hooligan gives a member who's a member who we love. Um, are the animals at the park cared for properly? And that's one of the things that Grayson was recently there and said he loved the animals and stuff like the goats
Mhm.
and the other animals. And I believe he has an emu there, which I
Well,
completely
they
hate.
ate the other one.
I'm sorry. Could you
They ate the other emu. They had to.
they who ate it?
The people at they served it
Oh,
in their chow hall, like, for a meal.
any reason why, or was that just they?
Well, I heard because it was mean.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
I mean, it's
I've
an
heard the
emu.
emus are pretty tasty, though. I've
Yeah.
never had
I
emu.
mean, well, yeah. I mean, they're fine. It's just usually when you have like
Yeah.
an emu in a petting zoo or a
Yeah, you don't eat them.
usually not. No, there are emu farms, but usually they're not. Sort of ones that. But if it was mean, I guess I can understand that. I just emus are generally pretty mean. They can be very mean. I
Yeah,
don't.
they sure can.
Um, I
But,
mean, they're
who
emus.
cares? It's an emu. What really, really, upset me, they had a pig, a big pig. I don't know what kind of pig it was, but very large, easily 400-pound pig. Her name was Millie, and she was a beloved family pet. Millie was
Okay.
donated to Dinosaur Adventureland under the conditions that Millie was not to be eaten, not to be
Mm,
slaughtered.
yeah.
Millie got slaughtered and eaten, and not while I was there. That was after I left, and if I had been there, Millie would not have been eaten. I was part of that, exchange when Millie's owner brought her, and was very emotional. Like, Millie's a
Mm,
beloved family pet, but we feel like she'd be better off here because there's more room, and you guys already have, like, this petting zoo, and they wanted to
yeah.
contribute to the ministry. So she was tore up about it. She's like, "You can have her, but you're not gonna eat her. That's the only condition."
That's a
And
horrendous betrayal of trust. That's a
Millie the pig got
horrendous
eaten.
betrayal of trust.
Yeah, Millie the pig
Wow.
got eaten. I hated that. I found that out after I left, and that broke my heart. Because Millie was a character. She was a sweet pig too. She was. You remember Millie? Yeah. Millie was awesome, wasn't she? Millie would come and stand on my porch and eat my dog's food, breaking out.
Shemosh just asked Mark, do you play sports? I don't know which
Uh,
Mark. I'll answer as well. It's just so we hear
okay.
both of us.
I used to.
Used to. I don't really. I more do stuff like swimming and when I was younger I did gymnastics and acrobatics and things like that, but not really play sports that much.
Yeah,
I went through the baseball and stuff.
I played basketball, baseball, football, wrestling, race
Oh,
go-karts, was in the military, but I'm not in any kind of physical condition to do any of that stuff really. torn my ACL 5 times. It's currently torn now. I've got degenerative discs, slight TBI. Just yeah. And I would like to say this, since somebody brought up sports. If you've got kids, keep them out of the contact sports. Let them wait till their bodies are more developed. Like, don't do the football. And I'm not telling you what to do. It's just I really regret, you know,
Mhm.
putting so much of my body at risk for a sports ball game that I still feel pain from it. Just not worth it.
Right. Yeah. No, and I think that's probably a wise move. And we do even worse over here. We have sort of contact sports like rugby
Rugby.
without any
Yeah.
padding or anything like that. It's absolutely crazy. But that I think that was the last question. I want to thank you so much, Mark. It's been a great interview. It's been over 2 hours, so I've gone way long, and I do apologize. But just hearing all of this from you and getting it from somebody that's actually been there is a lot better than just making sort of listening to people who are getting it second, third, fourth hand and sort of assuming that it's true. I'm going to put a big sus emojis in chat because I'm going to what you've said raises a lot of red flags for me.
Sure.
And
Uh,
from
it's
your
pretty
description,
incredible.
I would certainly label it a cult, just in the way that it is controlling the behavior of its members, sort of punishing, even psychologically punishing those who veer from this narrative that they have, just sort of not providing opportunities for people to get out of it. Sort of try saying, hey, we help people by taking them in. Yes, but that is only helpful if there's a way for them to get out of the situation as well. And it
Well,
sounds like they
Kant's
don't
made
do that
more
at all.
people homeless than he's made converts, in my opinion. So that's a pretty bad metric, if you ask me.
Mm. Yeah, and last minute super chat from Robin Webster for $2. Hello, Mark Stoney.
Hey,
I'm
Robin,
going to pop. Yeah,
how's that
Robin's
melt?
wonderful. Just a wonderful person. Um, Absolutely wonderful. And I'm going to put Mark Stoney's. If you do want more of Mark, and he's talked very, very openly on his channel, as I understand it. I don't think I've seen a whole heap myself, but you've talked very openly. Truck Driving Billy is making a liar out of me and sends in another super chat. Thank you so much, Truck Driving Billy. Has Mark S touched on the conspiracies of way Kent believes Trish Jones is innocent? I think you sort of touched on that, but you didn't go into it a great detail that he thinks that all of the charges are a conspiracy by the government
Mhm.
to make Chris Jones a bad person.
Well, not just to make him a bad person. The Chris Jones's story is that he snuck onto Bohemian Grove, took some pictures and videos, and they didn't like that, so they put false charges on him. But no, that's wild. It's stupid. That's not why Chris Jones was arrested, and he is guilty. He was found guilty by a court, a jury of his peers. Uh, the appellate court upheld his conviction. He's guilty.
Mhm.
He's a sex offender. He says he's a sex offender. He doesn't
He's
deny the
registered, yeah.
allegations. He just tries to brush them under the rug as if they were no big deal.
Mm. And to me, his description, they are a very, very big deal. You don't
Yeah,
you don't do that.
right.
It's absolutely horrendous. So yeah. But thank you so much. I'm going to wrap it up there. I mean,
Yeah.
obviously the chat loves you, Mark. They're asking tons of questions, but yeah, your thing is in the description as well.
All right.
Thank you so much for joining us. I want to give a big thank you to all of the channel members who do so much to allow me to even have these conversations, which is fantastic. A lot of people in the chat sort of says, "Oh, sorry, I can't donate." Totally understandable. I'm no problem at all. I more have these conversations because I want to have them. Like, don't get me wrong. It's fantastic. People help me and they contribute. Totally get it. But I'm more doing this because I enjoy talking to these people. So don't worry. It's no problem. No problem at all. If you're in a part of your life you can't do anything, that's totally fine. Not a problem at all. I hope you've enjoyed it. If you can, please do like and subscribe. Ring the bell for more of these interviews. I'll certainly be trying to have more people on, more different people, talk different subjects. I have to apologize to you, Mark. I have a room rumble where I went to your room that I've got to put up as well, that I haven't done the intro to,
Those
so
are
I haven't
fun.
put up, but that will be coming out, and that was a really good conversation on morality and sort of where morality comes from. And I look forward to speaking to you in the future, Mark. I hope we can have dialogues and talk about this stuff. It's really interesting to me. I'm so glad that you came on, and I want to thank you again. Thank you so much for coming on, and it's been a wonderful conversation.
And can I plug something that's going on my channel this week as
Oh, of
well?
course, yeah, go for it. Absolutely.
So
Sorry.
I don't know if you knew this yet or not, but I'm having Aaron Ra come on my channel and do a discussion with Christian Pike.
Oh, there
So
you
that's
go.
gonna be interesting. We're shooting for
Yeah.
Wednesday. Um, so
Have
I'm
you
gonna
put
be
a thing up yet? Like
No, I haven't put anything up yet, but
okay.
I was gonna get this out of the way, this interview. I was really looking forward to it. And again, thank you so much for letting me come on your
Oh, my
show
pleasure.
and pick my brain. That was fun. But yeah, Wednesday I should be hosting a show with Aaron Ra and Christian Pike, who is a young up and coming preacher. A lot of
Mm,
respect for Christian. He's a really
yeah.
sharp guy. A lot of respect
Yep.
for Aaron, really nice guy as well. Um,
Mm.
but
Well, Christian's been on here before.
I'll get some more
Christian's
information on that up as soon as I can.
Yeah. Well, Christian's been on my proofread before, twice, in fact. I've
Oh
had
wow,
Christian
cool.
on. So yeah, he's been on here before. I love talking to Christian. He's amazing. And Aaron, of course, is actually, if you know, he's got this personality, but he's actually a really nice guy.
Yeah,
I've met
yeah.
him once or twice before. So yeah, no, I'm really looking forward to that. So yeah, go to Mark Stoney's channel, hit the subscribe, and just hit that bell to sort of get notification of it when you do put the bookmark up there.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I'll probably be watching that myself, to be honest with you.
Thank
So
you.
yeah, that
Appreciate
sounds
that.
awesome. No, that sounds awesome. I'm a big fan of
I'm
Aaron's, and I'm a
excited.
big fan of Christian's. Yeah, absolutely. No, that's fantastic. Is there anything else that you're up to? Anything else that you want to share?
No, just want to say thanks again for letting me come on and talk and tell my story.
No, my
There's
pleasure, really.
a lot of people want to hear my story. There's a lot of people that really don't want to hear my story. I get a lot of flack from it from the Hoven camp. In fact, today I took a verbal assault from one of their guys, but I think tomorrow well, you know what? I'm not really going to do anything until after the R and Raw show because I want to make sure I've got a good production quality to it.
Yeah.
But
Yep.
I am going to be reviewing some of the recent things I've been doing here on my channel, on some other channels, talking and having dialogue and trying to build something that's a little more conducive to open dialogue than these traditional debate channels. So that's exciting.
Cindy's asking a good question. What's the subject that Christian and Aaron are going to be talking about?
Evolution, baby. That's what it's going to be
Evolution.
about.
Okay, there
Yep.
you go.
Christian wants to learn more about evolution, and who better to learn that from than Arn Ra
Yeah, there you
and
go.
Mark
Yeah.
Reid. Okay, Mark Reid as well.
No, Aaron knows way more than me. Honestly, he really does know his stuff when it comes to evolution. So yeah, no,
But yeah,
that's
I'm good. I
awesome.
don't really have anything else to share tonight. So yeah.
All right. Well, all the best. I look forward to talking to you. And don't forget, people out there, as I always do say, be kind to yourself, be kind to others, and have a really good day, night, or whatever
Say bye.
time zone you're in.
You want to say
Thank
bye?
you, everybody. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye. Yeah.